everyone. Hey, welcome, and thank you for joining us for our first InspireHER event. My name is Chris Klein. I'm the National Agency Distribution Leader here at Westfield, and it really brings me great joy to bring this event to you today and serve as your host this morning. We'd certainly much rather be interacting with you live and in person at Bridgestone today at the golf event, but you know what? There's a silver lining in everything, and we've actually been able to engage 3 to 4 times as many people virtually. So a huge shout out to all of you who've taken time to join us today. We're really excited about the content. And we really want to give a special thank you and shout out to the PGA for partnering with us on this event. On the surface, it might not seem like there's a great deal in common between an insurance company and a golf organization, but when you've got two industries that are so eager and passionate about supporting diversity and increasing their efforts to attract women, it really does create a terrific partnership and collaboration in a way that we can come together and exchange ideas. While we're on thanking folks, I would be remiss if I didn't thank my longtime coworker and dear friend, Janie Groza. She's Westfield's Corporate Responsibility and Diversity Officer, and her hard work behind the scenes really is so special in how this event came to you today. We recognize that really everybody today is in a different spot on their journey with diversity and inclusion. We applaud all of you for your commitment, your hard work, your reflection, and your willingness to learn and change. Opportunities like today are just one part of that journey, regardless of where you're at. Because really, when you think about diversity and inclusion, the business case is really substantial. We see results time and time again showing higher performing teams, greater innovation, and even documented improved financial results. But let's not improve the human impact as it relates to diversity and inclusion. They're equally, if not more so, substantial. Removing barriers so individuals can thrive and have the ability to have a greater impact for the organizations that they're part of and the communities they serve. So today we'll continue, or we might even be starting this conversation with you. Our hope is that this supports the work you are already doing, or even if it is just the beginning of how you can be better engaged on these issues. Take advantage of today. Treat it as a gift. What can you do to personally embrace and be a more effective business unit leader and owner, or even just an employee? What is one thing you will do differently and take forward from this session? How will your organization be better for it? Let's just do this. Let's dive right in. I'm going to introduce our very first speaker today, and it brings me great honor to introduce Robin Hahn, Westfield's President of Small Business.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Talk about the ultimate social distancing. While we can't be together today in person, I've really been looking forward to today and the opportunity to be with you, and thankful for technology and the great teams behind it that make it all possible. Today's event is focused on the inclusion journey and the story of missed opportunities when we have diversity without inclusion. We know that when done right, inclusion can open up opportunities for organizations to reach their full potential. And the fact is, diverse teams deliver better results and make better business decisions. And the proof is in the data. Research shows diverse teams are more creative, produce greater innovation, and ultimately have better outcomes. But when we have diversity without inclusion, we miss out on opportunity. Think about it. Imagine building a talented, diverse team with people of different races, ethnicities, genders, religion, and even more. It sounds like an ideal team. But what if they feel like they didn't belong? Think about the magnitude of that missed opportunity. Today is about discovering the power and potential when diversity and inclusion are combined to change lives and move businesses forward. So I want to share some things with you that you can put into action right away to make progress on your own inclusion journey. But before we get started, let's level set our conversation. More often than not, diversity and inclusion are lumped together. And it's easy to think that one automatically leads to the other, but that's not the case. Diversity is about representation. Things like different backgrounds and perspectives, experiences represented on your team. This includes people of different races, ethnicities, religions, genders, sexual orientations, physical abilities, ages, educations, social classes, and more. Inclusion, however, is much tougher to quantify. It's about bringing our whole selves to work and making connections to the work we do by creating a safe space to embrace what makes each person on our team unique. So what if we think about the inclusion journey, which is why we're all here today, about diversity is where you start and inclusion is where you actually make a difference. Today, I'll share 3 things that you can do to advance inclusion in your own organizations. Commit, communicate, and celebrate. Those are 3 things that we're taking on our journey at Westfield. First, it starts with intentional commitment. Inclusion has to be intentional. Think about it. If you do not intentionally include, you unintentionally exclude. And I can tell you that in my role leading small business at one of the nation's top 50 insurance carriers, I'm personally and emotionally committed to driving tangible, meaningful progress. You can't just hope it happens. We've all heard hope is not a plan. You have to be personally invested. I have to be personally invested. It's not something I can assign someone else to do. It takes commitment from the entire team, starting with me. I'm actively involved in the Women's Network at Westfield, and I've made it a priority to ensure diversity and inclusion are non-negotiables. So whether it's recruiting and hiring and staffing diverse teams, or ensuring that we operate our businesses on a day-to-day with a diverse mindset and an inclusive mindset. No doubt we have more work to do. And by the way, we're okay admitting that because that drives commitment. In the insurance industry, we know we need to cultivate an inclusive culture that attracts and retains top talent. More than 60% of the insurance workforce is comprised of women, yet women hold only 11% of named executive officer positions. We need to do better, and we want to do better, and I have no doubt that we will. Now let's talk about the second thing, which is communication. We can't underestimate the power of communication, not just in effort, but in how we communicate with each other. That's why we're actively creating opportunities for dialogue and discussions across Westfield. Between the pandemic and social unrest, we've recognized that many on our team were coming to work with heavy hearts, so we started by initiating dialogues. Our intent was to ensure our team felt that they belonged and that their voices were heard. Now, I've participated in many of these dialogues, and they have been eye-opening, inspiring, and creating deeper connections among colleagues. And it wasn't easy. I'll share with you at times it was downright uncomfortable. But the conversation has made us a stronger organization. We're also launching unconscious bias training. Did you know that our brains are naturally wired to be biased? That's right. We all have unconscious biases that kick in and intend to help us do things like go faster and avoid danger and feel good about ourselves. But those biases can work against inclusivity, like similarity bias, which is intuitively preferring people similar to us, or expedience bias. When we're rushed, we make obvious decisions that we think are obvious choices. And then there's experience bias, which is our natural preference to our own ideas based on our own experiences. And when you're aware of these biases, it's easy to spot them and mitigate them. And that's what our team will learn through training, which we're excited to bring to our whole organization. And third, celebrate. The third action that you can take is to celebrate. Celebrate differences, celebrate uniquenesses of your teams. Earlier this year, we dedicated an entire day to sharing unique attributes about ourselves with our colleagues. We held a mixer and we learned things about each other that we might never have uncovered. And it gave us the opportunity to celebrate what makes each of us different. It was inspiring. It was also a lot of fun, and I highly recommend an event like that. Our employee resource groups are yet another area. We call them ERGs, and that's also an area where we progress our work as well as celebrate and support our differences. ERGs are grassroots groups established by employees with similar interests who meet, share information, and collaborate with a focus on advancing diversity and inclusion. The Women's Network, the one that I'm a part of, is more than 500 members strong, women and men. and yes, men, a very important component of our women's network membership agenda. As a matter of fact, all of our ERGs seek diversity in their membership for the very reasons I cited earlier. Diverse teams focusing on creating inclusive environments create better outcomes. So to summarize, committing and communicating and celebrating 3 ways that we're making progress on our journey at Westfield. Personally, I'm motivated to build an even better Westfield, one that's more inclusive and diverse, where everyone brings their whole selves to Westfield each and every day. Thank you for letting me share Westfield's journey. And now let's keep moving. Today, we have some of the brightest minds that are making a difference and shifting mindsets. They'll be sharing stories and leadership practices around D&I that invite dialogue and drive advancement. And I hope you leave here today with inspiring ideas that you can put to work right away, both professionally and personally. So let's get started with today's keynote speaker. I am honored to introduce to you Renee Powell, professional golfer and educator. Renee is one of only 6 African American women to ever play on the Ladies Professional Golf Association Tour. She is the first woman of color to be elected to membership in the PGA of America, and in 2015 achieved another historic milestone. Renee was named one of 7 women as honorary members of the 260-year-old Royal and Ancient Golf Club in St. Andrews, Scotland. In 2018, she became the first American honored by the University of St. Andrews with the dedication of a residence hall, Renee Powell Hall. And in April 2019, she was elected the first at-large director of the PGA of America Board of Directors. That month, Renee also made a 1-year commitment to serve as the girls' golf coach at Minerva High School in Ohio, where her late father, William, was a member of the town's first prep golf team. In 2011, Renee founded Clearview Hope, which stands for Helping Our Patriots Everywhere, the only year-round women's military rehabilitative golf program in the country. The chapter serves nearly 60 female veterans across Northern Ohio. Please join me in welcoming Renee Powell.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's wonderful to be here. And do you know, as I think back about the things that have been said, and Chris talked about journey, and that is actually one of the things that I think we all can reflect upon is our journeys. I think that even though we are going through very difficult times and things are a little bit different than they were 5 or 6 months ago, but still we can be grateful. We can be very grateful about the fact that here we are. We have a wonderful audience, and some people may be sitting in the comforts of their home with maybe a glass of a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or even a glass of wine, because somewhere in the world it is afternoon. But, you know, I've taken a lot of time to really reflect upon my past, I guess, our past and our present and the future. And as we look at things again, as I say, we're grateful for many things. We're grateful, and as a professional golfer, I'm very grateful that we have golf tournaments going again. Here in Ohio, we've had 2 tournaments in Columbus, Ohio. The ladies played 2 weeks in Toledo, Ohio, and this week we're grateful to have the Senior Champion Tour in Akron, Ohio. So there's a lot to be grateful for. And as I reflect again upon history and past and present and future, I think a lot about, you know, where I've come from, where I am now, where I'm going, and the people that have really come into my life. Now, I've always been about diversity and inclusion the entire life that I've lived. But also, I think that we all need to gather and be a part of all of this. And today I thought what I would talk about and hopefully inspire not only her, but also inspire him, and really talk about the things that have, the challenges that have been in my life, but also how I've overcome those challenges. So life for all of us is a journey. It has a beginning and it has an ending, an alpha and an omega. Through life, most people deal with ups and downs, mountains and valleys, positives and negatives, blessings and burdens. We can be givers or we can be takers. We can learn from others, or we can isolate ourselves and remain ignorant to the many things and many wonderful things in life. Life has to offer so much, especially in a diverse populace and in an inclusive society. Some people have given a little bit more to handle than others, but it is how we handle those obstacles, it is how we handle those barriers that allow us to travel through the journey of life in either a very productive way or either in a non-productive manner. And I guess I have chosen really to travel through life in a very productive manner. I have certainly learned from many people. I've learned about being resilient, and that is really a major factor in my life and in achieving goals and going through life. You know, when you stretch a rubber band, you see the resilience that it has. And when you allow it to move back to its original position and its original shape, you see that it has resilience. And that is what all of us can add and all of us can have as a part of our life. Each of us has within us the inner strength to bounce back from barriers, to bounce back from obstacles, and to be resilient and to believe in ourselves. It is often the reactions of others that really teach us the lessons in life. And I can say that my first lesson that I learned was of a young child of 8 years old and in the 3rd grade. So I think most of us can think back and remember where we were or how life impacted us when we were young. Maybe all of us can't remember when we were 8, but the thing that happened to me at the age of 8 was when I really was confronted with the first bit of racism, I guess, and things that affected me in such a way that it had a negative effect, but then it turned into a positive effect throughout my entire life. So my lesson that I learned was this. Every day at recess time, I had 2 friends, my best 2 friends in school, and they were Catherine and Sue. And every day on the playground, we had a great time playing. And one day, they were walking towards me as I was walking towards them. But I could see on their faces something that was different. It was a puzzled look on their face. It was a rather dejected look on their face. And as we got closer, I asked them what was wrong. And it, almost in unison, out of their mouths, came these words. Our parents said, we can't play with you anymore. And when I asked why, their answer was, because you're colored. Now, that hit me so hard. My heart sank. My jaws dropped. And I thought, I'm the same person that I was yesterday. I don't look any differently. But yet and still, their approach to me was very different. It was, you know, at the time, there were so many other things that happened to me in my life when I went to school, and I was a big crier. I'd go home and I'd cry to my mom and I'd say, Mommy, this is what happened today. And it was my mother who reassured me that I had done nothing wrong, But she also told me that in life, I would run into barriers. I would run into obstacles. But through gaining confidence and self-confidence and believing in myself, I would be able to overcome anything. It was also a time when I could educate myself and I could educate others through my actions. The following year, though, I changed schools, and I actually never saw my best friends ever again. I often wondered, though, had they followed the same attitudes that their parents had taught them, or did they see the world a little differently through their eyes as they grew up? But the one thing that I learned was that how fragile feelings are. And I myself never, ever, ever wanted to exclude anyone. So from the age of 8 here to my current age, life has been a teaching and a learning journey. Because of my absolutely incredible parents who were my role models also, I was blessed to learn how to deal with obstacles, how to face challenges and with dignity, and to break barriers as a junior golfer, as a female golfer, and as a minority golfer, actually without even embarrassing those who showed signs of ignorance. So my entire life has been centered around the game of golf. So where did it all begin? And how did I learn to develop a will to succeed? Because that has always been part of me since the day that I learned from my best friends. It all began with a little boy who grew up in an all-white town in Minerva, Ohio. And he fell in love with the game of golf at the age of 9. He began to caddy and he began to play, all at that same time. And the funny thing was that he and a little friend had walked down a railroad track and they came upon this great big space. And it was a golf course. And they saw people out there. He saw them with sticks, hitting balls, as he would say. And it looked like they were trying to hit them and lose them, and walk, not run, to find them, to hit them again, to lose them again. But when my dad told me that story, it really reminded me a little bit of the Little Rascals. I could just sort of picture him and his little friend and coming upon this golf course and not knowing what it was, but saying, wow, we don't have to run. We'll learn from what they're doing, and I want to do that. That boy later in life became my father, William Powell. My dad, Willie, as he was known and as they called him in Minerva, started the very first golf team that Minerva ever had. He became the #1 player. He became the coach and the captain of the team. And he scheduled all the matches. And he got his brother engaged in the game of golf. And he just learned, and he said he was like a sponge. He learned everything that he could about the game of golf. But after high school, he was no welcome at the same area courses that they played as a team because his color looked a lot like mine. Or I guess I could say my color looks a lot like his. Except for the course that was really in his area, close to where he lived. When World War II broke out, he was sent and boarded a ship. It was the Queen Mary. And the Queen Mary was changed to a troop ship. And he left from the shores from New York City and traveled across the ocean to the shores of Scotland and in England. And during that time, during the 3 years that he spent there, he was able to play golf. On those rare off days, because every little town in Scotland and every little town in England has a golf course. So he was able to borrow clubs from members and play their golf courses, or else he said he would borrow clubs from the Red Cross, and members would allow him to play golf. So the way he talked about Scotland, the way he talked about England, really set in my mind, although I didn't know that I would ever go to Scotland. I never thought that I would ever go to England. But just from what he said, as a person, as a soldier during the war, you know, people treated him well. And where he wasn't able to play golf in his home area, he was able to play golf in a foreign land. Upon returning home, though, after 3 years, he wanted to play golf. And I think that the golf was reignited in him when he was overseas and when he was playing golf. And the things that had happened to him as a youngster just sort of, he tried to put in the back of his mind. But when he came back, he found that because of the color of his skin, he still was not welcome to play the same area golf courses. And it wasn't in the South, it was here in the North. But he was still welcome at the course that he grew up on. So he had a choice, as we all have choices in life. And that choice was to find some way to build a golf course. Now, can you imagine? Here is a young man who just came back from fighting a war, but he still had this burning desire to play the game of golf. But he knew there were barriers that were there. There were barriers that he knew that he could overcome. And my dad would always tell me, if there are barriers there, find a way around them. Go over if you have to, go under, go around, or go through, but just get to the other side. And that's the choice that he made. He decided that he would build a golf course to provide everyone the same opportunity, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of race. Because really, when you think about it, the 1940s and early on, youth were not very welcome on a golf course. And women certainly were not welcome on a golf course, nor were people that looked like me. Even though he could not get a bank loan, because his friends in his town, where their family, as I said, was the only black family in town, but his friends would say, Willie, you can go to this bank. And he would go, and he would be rejected. Or they would say, you can go here and get a GI loan. But at that time, and during World War II, there were GI loans, but they were only for white soldiers. They were not, at the time, there were none for black soldiers. And at that time, we also had two armies fighting one war. We had a black army, and we had a white army. So my dad, however, did not want to let any barriers deny him. He still had the will to succeed. So in 1946, he began building Clearview Golf Course. We're now 74 years later, nearly 3/4 of a century later. Clearview Golf Course is located in East Canton, Ohio, the golf course that my dad built. And the way he did it was he found a piece of land, and he literally was an old rundown dairy farm that was no longer in existence. And he actually was from Minerva, a small town. My mom was from the big metropolis of Canton, Ohio. And they would go back and forth. And my dad saw this bit of land and said that would be a perfect place for a golf course. And he literally walked every bit of that land. There's a stream that runs through the golf course. And he thought this would be a perfect place for a fairway. And this would be a perfect place for a green. And it was just like a painter, just like an artist. He decided where every place would go. So he then decided that he would put the golf course in, but literally most of the first 9 holes was built by hand. He had a hand seater around his neck after he got all the land plowed up, picked all the rocks, pulled all the fence posts, and he had a hand seater around his neck that you turn. And those who have put in a lawn know how tedious that work can be. But he literally walked back and forth, then back and forth, every step of the way, seeding every fairway of those first 9 holes, because he was so determined to make a difference. He was so determined to have the will to succeed. So from the age of 3, when my dad put my first golf club in my hand, golf has been in my DNA. It has really been a part of me, along with resiliency and along with the will to succeed also. So I want to take you through a couple of the things that have happened to me over the life as I learned to play the game of golf. So I started at the age of 3 and really didn't get very serious about the game until I was about 10. And my first tournament I played in was at the age of 12. Now, there was a tournament that was going on, and it was a women's division and was taking place in Cleveland, Ohio. I'd never been in competition, didn't know anything about competition. But there was a tournament 2 weeks later in Dayton, Ohio, which was a junior tournament. That was really a more important tournament, my father felt, for me to play. But since I had never played competition, he decided to put me in a tournament, and the women that I competed against were the age of my parents. Now, I was 12 years old, and they certainly didn't want a 12-year-old beating them. They didn't want a kid to beat them. And I can remember we were playing and walking, and we got to the 3rd hole. Now, I grew up as a golfer and not as a swimmer. And I came upon the 3rd hole and looked over, and there was a lake, a big lake. And these women were talking loud enough for me to hear, and they were saying, "Do you think we should throw her in?" And I thought, oh my gosh, they're talking about throwing me into this lake, and I can't swim, only because I was beating them. But then I remembered the things that my dad said. If you get them 1 down, get them 2 down. If you get them 2 down, get them 3 down. And so I tried to discount that out of my head. Well, 30 years later, I went back, and I became the head golf professional at this same golf course where I played my very first golf tournament. And the first thing that I did was get in a golf cart to go up, drive up on the 3rd hole. As I got to the hill and looked over, it was just a little pond. But for me, at the time, as a youngster, I thought it was a huge lake, especially when they were talking about throwing me in. It was in 1958 that, as a preteen, that my parents actually took me to see my first golf tournament of lady professionals. It was at Alliance Country Club, and I was there to watch the tour of these women golfers. There was one golfer that stood out, and she really stood out among all the others. She was wearing a powder blue knit skirt, a powder blue top, and she had the matching top. She had a cute little hat on, and she had pearls, a string of pearls, and pearl earrings. Her name was Marilyn Smith. And at the time, Marilyn Smith was the president of the Ladies Professional Golf Association. And she had the most infectious smile on her face. And so I saw her, and she saw me, and at the time, actually, my parents and I were the only people of color that were walking around the golf tournament watching it. And so every day, I went back because I wanted to walk and see Marilyn Smith play. Well, Marilyn also was one of those 13 original founders. And up until that day, I had never even knew that there were such things as women professional golfers or an LPGA. But 9 years later, I found myself with a golf bag with my name on it and the initials LPGA behind my name. So I was now a tour player. And the lady that I saw, the lady with the infectious smile, was now not only a friend, but also a competitor. My life's journey had begun. As a tour player, there were times that I would go to motels and they'd lost my reservation. There were restaurants as I traveled that wouldn't serve me. And I know my roommate on the tour for a long time was a lady by the name of Sandra Post, and she was Canadian. We would just go to the restaurant, and then if they didn't serve us, we'd just leave. And many years later, she said, you know, I wondered why they never served us. And I said, Sandra, it was because you were Canadian, but I didn't want to tell you that because I didn't want you to feel bad. But really, it was because of me. But, and there were security guards at different golf courses that questioned my credentials at the clubhouse and at the locker room because they had never seen a professional golfer who was black. They couldn't comprehend the fact that a black person could be one of the best players in the world. And there were times that Pro-Am partners didn't want to play with me because they'd never played with a black person. And then there were the nasty threat letters on my life simply because I was playing this most wonderful game of golf. Understanding what my father went through in his days and what I learned at the age of 8 gave me the fight and the will to never give up. And because I've always had the will to succeed, my journey to life sometimes has been challenging, but also very fulfilling. When I think of growing up in East Canton, Ohio, actually when I was growing up, we had 2 traffic lights. We now have 4, though. And so it makes the town look a little bit bigger. I mean, you can go around a complete square and hit every single one of them. But when I think about that and how my life has expanded because I never gave up, you know, but instead, I've been like this rubber band. I've had a lot of resilience, and I've always learned how to bounce back. I reflect upon the numerous trips that I've made to Japan and serving for 4 years on the U.S. versus Japan team matches, and we never lost a match. Or on 4 separate occasions, going to Australia, where you had to wait for kangaroos to cross the fairways, a little bit like dogs crossing the fairways here in our country. And also at the same time having won a professional golf tournament down there, the Kelly Springfield Golf Tournament, Australian tournament. And then I think about the many countries that I have visited on the continent of Africa and playing golf with presidents of countries and first ladies. But the most rewarding trip that I've ever made was a trip to Vietnam during the height of the war with the USO in support of our troops. And anytime I can do something which is supporting our military, supporting our troops, I'm right there for that. The year before my father passed, I was presented with an opportunity to receive an honorary doctorate from the University of St. Andrews as the first woman sports person ever to receive an honorary doctorate. And only the third American golfer behind Jack Nicklaus and Charlie Siffert to receive an honorary doctorate from the university. At that time, my dad was able to go with me. And he had not been in Scotland for 63 years since the war. So for me, it was a time that I could really thank him and my mom for all the opportunities that they had given me. The joy was being able to take him back to Scotland. And in 2015, the Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St. Andrews decided that they would change their rules to allow women to become members. And so they selected 7 women from the world out of the 87 million women golfers in the world. And I happened to have been one of them, along with Princess Anne, because her mother is the patron of the RNA, Princess Anne would rather walk her dogs than on the golf course than to walk and carry clubs and hit the ball, though. But becoming a member of the RNA, or the Royal Nation Golf Club of St. Andrews, as we call it, has been just unbelievable. And I know that my dad would be smiling down and joyous to see that his daughter, who he taught, has been able to gain recognition into the club and where golf began in St. Andrews. In 2018, my most valued honor came, and that was when the university decided that they would name their newest residence hall the Renee Powell Hall. I went over there to unveil it, and it's just amazing to see the name Powell on that building, because it's a reflection of my family and all that they have done and all that they have taught me. To be the first American ever to have a building at a over 600-year university named for them. And then also the only building named for a golfer in the home of golf. The University of St. Andrews is actually the third oldest university in the English-speaking world, behind Cambridge and Oxford. It's also where Prince William and Kate met and went to school. And I'm actually still waiting on my wedding invitation. And I think it must have gotten lost in the mail, though. So my life's journey has made a full circle. It's made a full circle to where I am now, back at Clearview, back in East Canton, where it all began for me. Where I'm the golf professional, the head golf professional there. My brother, Lawrence, is the head superintendent there. And I'm now honored to be able to lead the charge of the legacy of what my parents have achieved, what my parents created in Clearview Golf Course. And in 2001, the course was placed on the National Register of Historic Places, and we also have created a foundation, the Clearview Legacy Foundation, there at the golf course, where we have done so many different things to create more diversity, to create more inclusiveness. I think that recently I decided that what I would do is I did a program. If you saw the PGA Championship on Sunday, and one of the things that came about, and one of the things that I learned over life, is that it is imperative that we all work together for the good of all mankind, because we only inhabit one earth. Thank you very much, and I hope that I have served as an inspiration, not only to her, but also to him, and that you've learned a little bit about some of the barriers and challenges that I've had, but also the ones that I've overcome through resiliency and also through the will to succeed. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Renee. Those were incredibly moving remarks. Guys, to achieve what you have accomplished just through the lens of becoming a highly successful professional athlete are motivating and inspiring just in their own right, but to do it through a set of barriers that most of us listening today could never possibly comprehend is beyond touching. But we really appreciate the fact that you're willing to stick around for a few more minutes and take some questions from our listeners today, and thank you for those who have submitted questions. We've gotten quite a few here in the last 10 or 15 minutes, and we're going to do our darndest to get through as many as we can in the next 7 or 8 minutes. But Renee, if you're willing, first question that came through is, if you could spend a few more minutes just talking about how you have overcome the challenges of being an African-American female golfer in a sport that is clearly dominated by white males. And even expounding on that, what advice can you give to other African-American women aspiring to do anything with this similar set of challenges?
You know, I think the most important thing is to, and my dad was the one that taught me the game of golf, and to know whatever area you're going into or what other profession you're going into, and to know it thoroughly. And also, you know, if we harbor negative thoughts, then we're never going to achieve anything. And so I've always tried to keep a very positive spirit about me, but it wasn't hard for me because I had great role models. My mom and dad did that. And I think also just, you know, just have a lot of confidence in yourself. And as I say, learn as much as you can about something, whatever you're interested in doing. But you're right. There have been very few African American golfers on the LPGA Tour or on the PGA Tour. But you know, I love it. It's something that I've always done, and I absolutely love what I do. And I think that if you like something or if you love it, you're going to be able to sort of bypass many of those other barriers out there. And you have to sort of sometimes be like a horse with blinders.
I love that, right? And you spoke to a little bit to this next question we've gotten around becoming, you actually have to become technically proficient at your passion to have some success. But this next question speaks to the choices you might have made in your personal life that really helped you, or that helped guide you to your pursuits. So when you think about the intentional choices you've made and the barriers that you experienced and needed to overcome, can you help us think through that a little bit, and what, again, those specific choices along the way that helped you achieve your success?
Yeah, you know, sometimes it's hard when you know that you're going to run into barriers and that you're going to run into obstacles. And I grew up, I was very shy. And I think that as a youngster, I didn't have, when I would run into different situations, it sort of shattered my confidence. And for me, personally, golf was something that I'd go out and hit golf balls, and if I hit a good shot, then I was rewarded. If I hit a bad shot, you know, I took the brunt of it, right? But it is something that we all have choices, and you have to make a choice of what you think you love the most, what you think you can contribute to. And the one thing my mom always said was that, you know, in life there are going to be barriers, there are going to be challenges, but what everyone needs to do is to try to make a difference and to leave the world much better than we found it. And that's what I've always tried to do. You know, and I've learned so much from everybody that I've come in contact with. It could have been something that was not so pleasant, or it could be something that was more pleasant. But setting a goal for yourself also is something that will help you to achieve the things that you want to do in life.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. And you almost started to read our mind around the next question we had queued up for you, Renee, which is just fantastic, right? Definitely appreciated that, you know, that level of insight there. But you made some references there very specifically about having to deal with people who showed ignorance along the way, and how you were able to work through that and even educate them without necessarily embarrassing them. And you referenced that restaurants or hotels and certain places along those lines. I'd love it if you could expound for our audience a little bit about how did you think through what would be a very tough situation for many, but how you were able to kind of work through the education part without embarrassing those folks.
You know, I think that if you embarrass people along the way, then they're going to put up a bigger barrier to listening to you, and you're not going to be able to educate them. And the thing is that we can all learn from every situation. Right. And I think just in trying to find, you know, we all have, I think, more things that are alike than there are different. And the thing is that, you know, if you cut anybody, we all bleed the same way. And it's just finding, too, what are the things that are more important to that person that you're talking to? What are the most important things? And then really trying to get on the same wavelength with them. And then you can, you know, sort of like building blocks, you can continue to build a relationship.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think it was insightful there that you approached it from a way to uplift and to bring positivity to the experience without necessarily going down that emotional path. I'm curious when you think about this, and it was a question I had, but this really, the question that our listener asked, I think spoke to it more. But what role do you feel your generation can play in supporting this generational fight, or this observation at least, that there's a generational impact to this current racial situation during the pandemic?
Wow. That's a tough question.
That.
Do you know, I look at the things that have happened in the past and things that we've gone through back in the 60s. Yeah. And I think people need to understand history. So it all really gets down to education again.
Sure.
And knowing the contributions that everybody has made to the world, to society, to our country. And then, you know, we, in thinking so much more clearly about things, and I think that the time that we've had over the last few months have certainly made us all think.
Right.
You know, made us all think, and I think that every single person, no matter who they are or what level they're on, can make a contribution, can make a significant and a positive contribution. You know, I think, you know, God has given us all talents, I believe. And we need to use those talents for the betterment of all people. And I think, you know, and a lot of times we just have to really stop and reflect and think of where we are, think of where we've been, where we are now, and where we want to go, and where we want to go to make our world and this earth a better society.
Gosh, Renee, I could not think of a better way to punctuate your remarks this morning. Incredibly moving again, deeply inspirational. I hope everybody out there today was able to take away some powerful insights from Renee's story and her journey through just a fascinating life and a highly influential life. But this does bring close, again, thank you on behalf of all of us here, Renee, at Westfield and with the PGA Tour for your time this morning. This brings to a close the first half of InspireHER. What we're going to do now is take a short 5-minute resilience break. What I would encourage everybody to do, if you have not read the bios of the upcoming panel, but really would be to stand up, stretch your legs, refresh your coffee or tea or whatever your beverage of choice is, and just take a quick break and join us back here again in 5 minutes where we're going to dive into a panel with some very esteemed colleagues. Thank you. Welcome back. Hey, hopefully you got a quick resiliency break in and took a moment even to reflect on the remarks of Renee as you refreshed your coffee and stretched your legs. But we're excited to dive back in. We've got another hour of fantastic content and deeply insightful conversation with a full-blown panel of experts in this arena. And we're excited to bring to you a moderator today who is a friend and partner, a deep thought partner of Westfield, Vincent Brown. He's the president and CEO of Vincent Randolph Brown Consulting. And he has been a motivational speaker. He's a consultant. He's an author. In fact, he's got a brand new book coming out here just in September. And we couldn't think of a better way to facilitate this panel today with our colleagues than to ask Vincent to share his expertise and to really help shape and guide the conversation for us today. So, Vincent, it's all yours, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. And I will tell you that I am absolutely inspired, and I'm hoping you are inspired like I am as well. Renee, thank you so much. When I listened to you, your story captured my heart, and it really talked about resilience. So thank you so much. What an amazing panel we actually have, which I am so excited about. So let me just kind of set the stage for you. Again, my name is Vince Brown. We have an amazing panel. So when you take a look at Nira and Paris and Michael and Craig, and what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how do you make sure that you are empowering women in the workplace? And we're going to look at it in two directions. One direction is empowered women who are really making it happen inside their organizations. And then the second are men who help and support and empower women. Because inclusion, as was mentioned before, is an intentional action. And so it's important that both of those in place at the same time. And oh my goodness, do we have an amazing panel. I will also just share with you, as I was listening to the story that Renee shared, I thought about the women who have empowered and inspired me in my lifetime. My business partner of over 35 years, Dr. Janet Reed, is one of the most inspiring women I've ever worked with. And today I get inspired every day with my Chief Administrative Officer, Latoya Everett. Women make a difference in the workplace, and I'm just so excited to learn from this session today. So I know you've had a chance to look at the bios. Let's just get the panelists right up here, and so we can get going right away. So look at this amazing panel that we have, and I just can't wait to dive in. I hope you're like I am, but I'm just ready to dive in, get some learnings, and get some insights. So let's just start. I'm going to ask you all the same question to begin, And I'm going to start with Nira and Paris. We'll go to Michael. And then what I'm going to ask is for you to just take 2 to 3 minutes, and this is really hard. Take 2 to 3 minutes, tell a little bit about you, your story, what inspires you, how you connect to golf. I mean, anything like that. Let us know who you are. And then we're going to get into your amazing stories as relates to women in leadership. But let us know who you are. Thank you. Nira?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate. So obviously, as a woman of color, I will say that I bring, and I've always known that I brought a different perspective, that it was more than my education and experience that lent to what I could offer in the workplace. And it's very interesting because growing up, I didn't play golf. My family, as a daughter of immigrants, we were more about education. We were less about learning about sports or participating, though I did do so. But golf was not one of them. So it is interesting to me now that I'm with the PGA Tour as an attorney, but more importantly, taking on a newer role this last year to head up our Inclusion Leadership Council. And so I would just say that, you know, this is something that my job is, of course, practicing law, but my passion is really about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm really proud of where we've really come along as the PGA Tour. And I'm really excited to share what we are doing going forward.
Great. Thank you so very much. We're so glad to have you here. Paris, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. So, hi, thank you so much for having me. You know, I had some prepared remarks, but Dr. Powell actually got me thinking about what might be more important for me to share, which is, you know, my why is really the people that I live and share my home with. So I am a Pakistani-born Muslim American. I'm in a intercultural, interfaith marriage, and we have these 2 amazing little ones that we've been blessed to help grow and empower every single day. And I actually, as I was listening to Dr. Powell speak, you know, had the opportunity to work with a diversity, equity, and inclusion firm, which is really where my love and passion for just being right and golf intersected. So, you know, there also as a woman of color, it's regular that I'm the only one of me in the room. And I learned early, just like Nira just stated, that that also affords you the opportunity to bring something different to the table, not just your education, not just your upbringing, but really a different perspective. And while I was at that firm, a partner picked me up one day and said, you know, you're good at your job. What's really going to make you better is if you learn how to play golf, because a lot of business happens on the golf course. And so he took it upon himself to actually take me and my husband out to the golf course on his weekends to teach us how to play. And there's so many lessons just from those 9 holes, everything from I learned about my own frustration and an inability to manage anger when I was losing, to being able to have a voice to say only one person can give me direction at a time, to learning how to have casual conversation that led to great business outcomes. So I'm just pleased to be here today and learn from everybody else on the panel. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Paris. And I think your story is so powerful. There's some things that happen on the golf course that really are opportunities for inclusion, which I'll talk a little bit later. So I'm glad you teed that up because it's a special relationship that actually occurs there. So let's go to Michael, and then we'll go to Craig. Michael, we're just going to do an audible.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, technology. It's great when it works, right?
Absolutely.
Well, good morning, everyone. Great to be with you. I'll share a little bit about kind of my personal journey and my why and what brings me here today. And you've heard a little bit from Robin this morning about Westfield's focus on, D&I. And what I often say is, as much as it is a corporate journey, it's also a personal journey. So it's the individuals of the company and what we aspire to be. And the difference that we want to make, knowing that we're all at kind of different spots of the journey, that I think what makes the focus so important. And a little bit just a kind of my why and my background and kind of where I've come on this journey. It's a little over 4 years ago. I was asked to be a sponsor of the Women's Network at Westfield. So it's an ERG, a resource group for employees, about empowering women, certainly developing women, finding opportunities for roles and development and connections. And part of the ask of me was to increase the male membership of the Women's Network, and I failed pretty miserably at that. But it opened my eyes to some conversations about not only having men sign up for the Women's Network, but also having them engage and figuring out how they could engage. And it opened up a conversation with men about why they may feel uncomfortable with that, or where they were at on their journey. So that inspired me to learn more, to have more conversations, to challenge myself. And so I've been on this path. It's awkward to talk about, I will say that, because I'd rather do it and not talk about it, but recognizing that, if I could inspire others, that's important. One quick story I'll share in terms of my why, but I was on a panel about 2 years ago at a conference, and it was around D&I, and it was around how men can engage in these efforts, particularly white men can engage in these efforts. And the moderator for the panel was somebody from the insurance industry, and the insurance industry is definitely male-dominated, white male-dominated. I think there's progress, but still work to be done. But the moderator is a person of color, works for another carrier, has been an inspiration to me. But after the panel, we were talking for a little while, and I said to him how it's difficult and it's awkward at times for me to talk about these issues and to talk about these things. And in a pretty direct but polite way, he kind of looked at me and said, "You need to get over yourself." And when you look around the room, when you look around this industry, there are more people who look like you than look like me. And if you don't talk, who's going to talk? And so that's been kind of my inspiration. He's been my inspiration to get out there, to talk about this, and to engage whenever I can.
Thank you, Craig. That is so very powerful, so very powerful. Do we have Michael back? It looks like Michael may still be frozen.
I sure hope so.
Okay. Michael, is that you? Okay. I'm going to continue to move forward, and then we'll certainly, hopefully have Michael up in just a moment. I was struck by some things that Renee shared, and I want to ask this question of both Paris and Nira. This is the question I want to ask, and I want to kind of go to the heart of it, if you don't mind. Dr. Renee talked about lost registrations, the fact that questioning credibility, maybe even though you are credentialed, perhaps checking those credentials. Oftentimes we talk about those as microaggressions that sometimes happen in the workplace. And also what I heard from was this whole idea about resiliency. So if I could ask the two of you all, how or if have you dealt with those issues of microaggressions or challenges or barriers? And how do you also maintain your resiliency and your spirit? So Paris, why don't we flip the order and have.
Sure. So for me, I was thinking about this. I experience them every single day for different reasons. Being a mom that works, being born with great genes where my skin doesn't crack even as I'm getting a bit older here. Oftentimes my age is assumed to be different than what it is, which oftentimes alludes to people thinking my experience is newer as well. Where I really resonated and would like to share my experiences different in nature but similar in outcome to Dr. Powell is what's within my circle of control is how I handle those situations as they happen. And so one of my biggest pieces that I focus on is relationship building, because when microaggressions happen, specifically when I'm the recipient of one or am in the room while it's happening, there's already a relationship and a comfort there to bring others along as it's taking place. So it can be small, what we might see as small examples of language people use, or overly explaining what a woman has just said, or actually reiterating what a woman has just said as maybe your own idea. Being able to calmly say like, oh, you know what, I think that's similar. Nira just mentioned that. And Nira, I agree. And so really revalidating a different person's strength or comment. And it also helps to show others how to do it in a non-aggressive, non-confrontational way. And that's actually more powerful to me than just noting that the microaggression happens or complaining about it or letting it hold me down, but thinking about what's within my circle of control to do better, show up better, and how can I lean into really positive, meaningful relationships to also bring others along on the journey.
Wow. Not only was that a powerful set of insights, you also shared some really great techniques in terms of how to deal with microaggressions in an affirmative way that hopefully leaves everybody whole, but makes a very strong point. So thank you so much. And so, Nira.
Yeah, thank you. And Paris, that was an excellent example of the micro affirmations that can really sort of overcome some of the microaggressions. But I totally agree with you. I mean, I think a lot of women, and I know personally, we have experienced on a day-to-day basis these microaggressions. A lot of times it comes in the way that if they don't necessarily agree with what I'm saying, which unfortunately happens quite a bit in my role, they will sort of question it and want to go over my head or really dive in and make sure that, basically question where I'm coming from, whether I have the experience, the knowledge, the background to be able to provide that perspective. And especially young in my career, it was so frustrating. My stomach would drop. It was hard not to be overwhelmed and just so disappointed that once again, I was in this position. But what I found, and I don't want to take anything away from the negativity it creates, but what I found is that as I overcame that, as I showed that I knew what I was talking about, as I proved that what I was saying was based on sound reasoning, there was sort of, I won't say a positive, but it was something that made me feel even more confident in what I did, something that really affirmed that what I was doing, that I was really, I not only belonged at the table, but I was more than participating and bringing my weight in what I was doing. So, I mean, it is frustrating and you do experience it on a regular basis, but that's why, to Pars's point, I love it when people say, building on what someone said or to follow up, or I will even say in one situation, a male completely rejected what someone said. And I could jump in and said, well, I want to go back to what Julie was talking about, because I think that that's a really important point, that I understand what you're saying, but I want to be able to make sure that we fully understood and listened to that perspective. So there are a lot of things that can be done, but it took some time for me to really figure out the best way to overcome it in a way that made me feel more confident, as opposed to what it was intended to do, which was to try to demean my my general confidence level.
Well, I'll tell you, I think now we know why you all will be called dynamic duo after this conversation. These are just incredible personal insights that are really providing and sharing the skills that are also necessary, but the resilience. And one of the things that we know for sure is that women have many challenges in the workplace, and unfortunately, women of color often almost have a double bogey, two things that they have to cover as well. Michael, I am so grateful that we have you back now, because you've got a compound question. The first question is to share a little bit about you, and the second is, as a male, how have you championed the causes for women in the workplace? Michael.
Sure, thank you. And hopefully everyone can hear me now. Just to start, my upbringing was being raised by a single mom, and a single mom who had with her my grandmother and my grandfather, who gave me wonderful examples of what it would mean for me to grow up and become a man, and how to take action and direction from women, and for that to be the norm. And so I grew up in a house where I didn't have to pick and choose which topics went to mom and which went to dad. Everything went to mom. And so I knew how to put on the corsage. I knew how to listen before speaking. And then as I got older, I just needed to remember that stuff, right? And so my grandfather gave me an anchoring in his examples of how I should grow as a young man into a man. And I can remember my grandfather and his brother-in-law going golfing every Saturday, and I had no idea what that meant. But there was a public course that would allow African-American males, permit African-American males to golf. And so they would go, and they would be gone for a good part of the day, and they would come back and then practice in the park behind the home. And I thought, I want to do that someday. And so I chaired a golf outing many years later. My grandfather passed away when I was younger, and I remember driving up the fairway the first time, and remembering that here in Cleveland, Ohio, my grandfather could not have golfed at that club when he was golfing with his brother-in-law. And so it began to, the realities of life hit me pretty quickly. Now, taking what we all are, which is the body of our experiences, forward into the workplace, what's my role, and how have I tried my best to lean in where I believed and believe it's necessary. And part of that has been during the evaluation period, either of an applicant, a candidate, or an employee to be promoted. I think one of the strongest voices I can bring in the room is reminding others in the room that the value and measure of that candidate should not in any way be proximity to other male characteristics. And recognizing that when we see the value of the candidate, questions like, culture and family development, the age of kids, and these things that can have subtle impact. There needs to be an advocate in the room. And it's important then that when the candidate is successfully brought into the company or promoted, that same vigor, the same rigor in having a complementary team is applied to the males who are already on that team, so that the female professional is not carrying the burden alone or among a few.
Powerful story about your earlier connections to women and inspiring you and leading you, and then how you actually continue to carry that message forward, which is also incredibly powerful. So thank you so much for sharing that. Craig, I think we're having just a conversation here, and we're really keeping it real. Craig, are you reminded of any tough conversations that you've had to have where you had to lean in to support a woman in the organization or women-related issues? And if so, talk a little bit about what that was like and what you did as you went through that process.
Yeah, it's a great question, Vincent, and I'll share just two perspectives. I think one thing as you think about conversations that need to be had, I think one of the things that can give particularly men kind of fuel for that journey is to listen to stories. And so anybody listening to the stories that we've just heard today, whether it's Renee, whether it's what Michael shared, the dynamic duo, I think all those things just highlight what the need is. I will say one of the one of the key moments for me actually came through an experience that I had with an organization outside of Westfield, and it was an organization where there was a female leader, and over the course of a short period of time, I just recognized that the men in the room, I guess I will say, was holding back, that individual, and probably wasn't even recognizing it, was unconscious. And so, the stories that you just heard, I think the things that we reflect on, or that I reflected on through that journey was, at the end of the day, we were an organization that wanted to make an impact, and we weren't realizing our full impact because we were just making it hard for a woman leader to achieve what we were asking her to do. And whether it was comments in meetings, whether it was continuing to ask for clarification, those behaviors were exhausting. And so I had to lean into two conversations. I had to lean into a conversation with that woman leader and understand what she was feeling, and sort through that. And then I had to help be kind of an advocate with that organization, and try to take people along for the journey of we're not going to realize our full mission. We're not going to realize just our full objective, because we're taking time in meeting that we don't need to. We're not allowing somebody to show their full effort. So that's hard. It's hard to
Yes.
recognize. It's hard to lean into those conversations. And a natural reaction is people don't see it. People don't see the behaviors that they have. People don't think that they're doing anything wrong. We've just
Yes.
been conditioned to do this for long periods of time.
Yeah, that's the thing about biases. The fact of the matter is that they're sometimes really blind to us, but real clear to others. And that's why we have to keep in mind that we are all human and we're all biased. I'm reminded of a metaphor for going through your career. And some of us go through our career as if we would have a tailwind. So if you think about flying, when you have a tailwind, it helps you to fly. You go faster, you go higher. It's a smoother ride when you have a tailwind. Unfortunately, some of us have headwinds. And if you've ever flown to the west from the east, you know what those headwinds are like, right? It's a bumpier ride. You expend more fuel, and it usually takes you longer there. And I think the objective for all of us in an inclusive culture is to have an environment where there are many more tailwinds than headwinds. And especially as we think about all of the unproductive energy that can be taken away from anybody, in particular women, if we're dealing with some of these biases. So having champions as part of that is very important, but also having women who are resilient and strong and powerful is equally important. So with that statement, Nira and Paris, can you share a time that you had to advocate for yourself? And what was that like, and what did that feel? We'll go with Paris.
Tricked me. I thought we were going to flop back again to Nira. Can I think about a time? Yes, I can think of lots of times. What I thought would be helpful is actually a time when I didn't do it, and what I learned from it. And so, growing up as an immigrant here, there are just certain values that are a bit different. For me, it's I'm always very rooted in gratefulness, which I think is, I have bias probably to myself, I think is a good quality, but oftentimes in the workplace gets in the way of really being able to advocate for yourself. I tend to have this feeling of, oh gosh, if I really, push this, it's going to come across as I'm not grateful or thankful for what I've been able to earn or do thus far, or greedy. And so I found myself just recently doing the same thing. And my boss, I have two great bosses, both males, both white. One is also an immigrant. And he was like, cut the bullshit. You need to stop being humble first in this scenario. It is okay to come out and say, I am the best for this, and this is why. He's like, get it, that you'll be open to other opportunities, all of the other things. You've done the groundwork for people to see who you authentically are. It doesn't always, being humble and being grateful doesn't always have to be the first way that you lead. Would I love to say that I'll be able to model that way every single time without coaching? Yes. Do I know to be true that I'm going to slip up again? Yes. But it's a key learning on, if you are authentic to your values, to yourself, people learn that about you much faster than they don't. And the importance of having somebody in your corner that trusts you enough to, actually call you out in a aggressive and loving way to check you, I think is equally important.
Wow. Thank you so much. Nira.
Yeah, so similar to Paris, I can't say that I was always good at advocating for myself, particularly early on in my career. I justified it or rationalized it as sort of like, well, if I've earned it, I shouldn't have to ask for it. I shouldn't have to push for it. They'll come to me. And I was fortunate a lot of times that happened, but it doesn't mean that was the right way. So again, sort of later in my career, the most recent example is with respect to the Inclusion Leadership Council that we've established here at the PGA Tour. Last year, a number of us were talking about how we could really change the dynamic. We had been intentional for about 5 years on the D&I front and had made a lot of progress, but I think we felt like this was a time that we really needed to sort of kick it to the next level. And so working with our chief administrative officer, our head of human resources, talking to a number of people, we collaborated and came up with an Inclusion Leadership Council that is comprised of 8 leaders across our organization that report to the chief operating officer, to the chief administrative officer, to the chief legal officer, and of course our commissioner. And this is in addition to our day job. But I asked to do this. I asked to take it on because it was a passion of mine. And I think younger in my career, I probably would have not advocated for it. I would not have pushed as strongly as I did. I would not have said, I want to do this, and hoped that somehow miraculously they would figure this out and I would have this opportunity. So it has taken some time. And I will say that, while my generation and older generations sometimes, don't necessarily understand millennials and Gen Zers as well as we should, this is one thing that I have been so proud of our workforce for doing, is that they are willing to come forward. They have, that they will stand up for what they believe in and really try to push for change. They will try to push for themselves. And I've really respected that and wish that younger in my career I had been more confident in that way. But I'm glad that while I might be late in arriving at this, that recently I've really tried to advocate for myself more. And I've found that as uncomfortable as it is, it's not as hard as I thought it would be.
Thank you so much. And at least what I'm taking away is when you have the power of the internal drive supported with the power of external support, great things happen. And those careers can advance. And we already know the business value of it. So as we're coming to a close, I'd like you to inspire our listeners with 1 or 2 quick thoughts or challenges to continue to create an inclusive workforce for all with a focus on women. And so Craig, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Michael, then we'll go to Nira, and we'll end with Paris.
All right, thanks, Vincent. So a couple of, I guess, words of inspiration or thoughts, and I guess I want to specifically speak to any man who's watching, and when I look at our industry, so I'll talk about the insurance industry, we're often characterized as stale, male, and pale, which I guess I'm I'm holding up that well today. But I think that, real change is going to come when people stand up and know that, that things can be different, but also understanding the reason that things can be different. So regardless of where you might be at on this journey, I'd ask you to check yourself one. So really be observant of your behaviors, of the meetings that you attend, of the conferences that you attend. Start to observe, what happens there. Who's in attendance? Who's not in attendance? And how can that be different? And make sure that it's different for a reason, because I can tell you, I sit around many tables where, I look at, the lack of actual diversity, and it's not just gender diversity, it's actual diversity of thought. And so, really challenging yourself, it's a lot of people who are like-minded, who don't have different experiences. And so, really looking at, how can this be different? So that would be number one. But then number two is to really think about your why. There's a business imperative, there's a business driver to this. We're going to be better organizations when we have diversity. There's tons of facts around that. And at the same time, it's not just about diversity, it's about being inclusive. So I think the balance of those two things, really be observant of yourself, of your surroundings, and then really think about how can you start to push in on this? How can you be part of the change?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Craig. Those are some phenomenal thoughts. Michael.
Just a few thoughts, and I'll run through them. There needs to be an emphatic distinction without division. And by that I mean, I wish our differences were not viewed as subtraction or division from the collective pie. It actually enhances our value. And then, maybe to the question, how do we know when we're getting this right for male and female leaders? I think it's when someone very different from us can see themselves in us. It's an evidence of real barriers breaking down. And remembering that in these rooms, each participant defines culture. And that includes the women in the room. If we're going to have outperformance, it has to include women's perspective. And I think to a comment we heard earlier, sometimes the female voice in the room feels muted because there's not been an environment that cultivates an interest in hearing the perspective in a genuine way. The last two notes that I have here, we can't allow the weaknesses and shortcomings and insecurities of men to influence how our female colleagues show up. It just negates the authenticity and the value proposition, which brings me to the last item, which is, what good is the diversity if we don't allow folks to be diverse when they show up in the room? What good is the value of diversity if one can show up and be a bit too diverse? And so my closing thought is that we are only better if we take what we took into the practice of hiring and we don't try to shave the edges on that, but we make room for those wonderful characteristics that we said, this is a great fit for our company, this is a great fit for our culture. If we can allow that to live and work its way through our companies and our organizations, we've got a pretty good shot at seeing ourselves in each other and outperforming as a collective as well as individually.
Wow, that is incredibly powerful and some great insights and very practical. Thank you so much. So Nira?
Yeah, so as Craig was talking to the men, I'm going to sort of direct my comments directly to the women. We talk a lot about unconscious bias, and, we have it too. And I want to be clear that it's something you said, Vincent, not all women are not monolithic. Women of color and of different colors within the color all experience things differently. And it's sometimes hard when we feel like we have to choose between being female, being an immigrant, being, someone of color. it's all part of a collective experience. You cannot simplify or separate them out. And I would say we all need to check our unconscious bias and make sure that we all have it, but we need to overcome it. And one of the things that I've even talked about within my own department is how we look at men. One of the things that I required all the men who just recently had children to do is make sure that they are taking time off. We have a very generous parental leave, but take that time off. Don't put it on your spouse if you have one or your caregiver. You need to take that time off for doctor's appointments, for the time off when the child is born, because until you start doing that, the rest of us, the women, the mothers, are going to always feel like we're different or might be differentiated in a way that isn't positive. So we need to do and make sure that we are reflecting the inclusive behaviors that will also help us in the end. But we need to make sure that we are not thinking that we are immune from incorporating some of those biases ourselves.
Thank you so much. Very well stated. Paris?
I would leave, I think, all of us with two questions to ask ourselves, which is, why don't we and why can't we? And I'll expand on that a little bit. So, when you're in the workplace or in your personal life, sometimes something happens and you feel it. Back when I was a kid, we used to call it feeling it in your gut. Now I feel it in my ears, like my whole face gets hot. That's my internal check of, I don't like what just happened, even if maybe I can't articulate why in the moment. I don't like it. And I would encourage us to ask, why don't we have more different people in the room? Why don't we have different perspectives at the table? Because that's less of me putting my opinion on, we don't have it because we don't believe, or we're ignorant, or we're this or we're that, but really opening up to the dialogue to why don't we? And then the last one is, why can't we? I won't speak for everybody on the phone. I will just speak for myself, which is, if somebody tells me I can't do something, I get a different kind of feeling, right? And so if we can train ourselves to say, why can't we be more aggressive when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? I've never been in a business room talking about talent where someone says, oh, we don't want to have that. We don't want them to focus on finances because they need more training. They don't know how to do math. We're not okay with that, but we tend to be okay with having a slower pace when it comes to the topics of equity, inclusion, diversity. And I would challenge us to say, why can't we do it faster? Why don't we find different ways? And I think, going back to my comments on circle of control, that's something that each of us can control, both for ourselves, our families, and in the places that we do business. So I would love for you to add those two little ticklers into the back of your mind and maybe test it out today. Why don't we? Why can't we? And maybe share with a peer and share with others what your learnings are.
That is great. I can tell you, for me, I have learned so much. And I've been reinforced and inspired, re-energized. And I want to just kind of bring this to a close. We had a couple of questions that come in, and I'm going to try to wrap these questions up in one. So if I can have slide one up here. So if you could you give an applause wherever you are to these amazing panelists? I know that you are there. I want to bring this to a close with what was started when we talked about and where we challenged to go. And the fact of the matter is that if you're human, you're biased, and we are all biased. But here's the reality, folks. Some people, for whatever reason, behave more naturally inclusive. And we believe that it would be a much more productive workplace, and we would be able to foster the career of men, women, gays, lesbians, transgenders, all types of sexual orientation. All of those things would be enhanced if we had more people who are naturally inclusive. So, next slide, please. Here's the bottom line, folks. There are certain behaviors that we can exhibit. And I think if you recall the panelists, you would have heard a lot of these. Be an explorer. Be curious. Get to know people beyond what you think you can see. If you see a stereotype, if you see something negative that's not right, call it out. Have more diverse relationships with people who are different than yourself. If you see a bias, disrupt it in a constructive way, as Paris had shared. And always execute the power of the pause. Make sure that you are not being biased, and sometimes we need to slow down. The last slide, please, that I'd like you all to think about are ways to disrupt bias. And here's something that I think is really powerful that can happen on the golf course. You're walking those 18 holes, and something magical happens. Because while you're walking, you're building connected understanding. You're having conversations. You're getting to know how someone thinks and how they think. And guess what, folks? That can begin to reduce the impact of biases. The second thing that happens when you're walking and sharing on that golf course is that there's shared trust being built. That shared trust, when you create shared trust with people who are different than you, it can impact and reduce the impact of biases. The third is respectful empathy. Not sympathy, but empathy. When the person's shoes become your shoes and you can feel their story and perhaps even their challenges and become an advocate for it, that will reduce the impact of biases. And then last and certainly not least, when you have significant emotional relationships with people that are different than yourselves. These are all things that each of us can do. So what do I say? When we are back in this world where we can do what we love to do and be reconnected, I love the virtual. You could do this virtually, but next time when you're actually on a golf course, really be intentional as you start to think about how you create an inclusive workplace. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful information that was shared by the panelists. Westfield, thank you for creating this forum and creating an opportunity for us to pause, to reflect, and really recommit to not only inspiring others, but really to inspire this amazing country and world that we live in. So with that, we're going to go ahead and begin to close it down and to thank you all so very much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Vincent, for really facilitating what a phenomenal panel discussion. And a sincere thank you also to the panelists, Neera, Paras, Michael, and Craig. It was just a fascinating conversation, and I know for one I could have listened to you folks discuss this all I guess the rest of the morning here. But as we think about wrapping up today, a couple of thoughts, and even just listening to this myself in my own reflection, I was excited to see or hear that Neera and even Vincent went there at the end, and it's this notion around bias. And I'm a self-appointed, I guess, science geek, and I've read a little bit about how the brain works and consumed some content about that, and even gotten into understanding bias. But admittedly, one of the flaws in my own connection of the dots has not been connecting bias to this concept of diversity and inclusion and how the bias is showing up in the way I interact with peers or professionals, and even those that I hold closest to me as friends and family. So it's been a real powerful journey for me in that regard. But as I reflect on the day, I would ask you all to do the same. Think about the things that resonated with you, and however it is that you consume content and digest it and bring it to action in your own life, whether it's journaling or simply just thinking about this as you drive around. A couple of things that I wanted to point out and just bring everybody back to, and that was the 3 C's that Robin shares. That was just a couple of hours ago, but it was really passionate call to action and very easy for us all to think through. And then just the powerful journey that Renee took us through in her entire life, and and growing up with a father who was trying to do something good around this calling within golf and all of the hurdles that he went through and that she went through with a pursuit of being a professional athlete and now moving in to her role was just astounding to me again. And then we just again wrapped with a fantastic dialogue with these panelists. But it has been really great to think through that, to have such phenomenal support from the PGA Tour. Again, Janie Groza behind the scenes here, all of the folks from the production staff and our marketing team who bring this together to you in what can be a challenging environment. Again, we'd love to have brought this to you in person, but the silver lining again was the fact that we were able to touch 3 to 4 times as many people today as we could ever have in person. So as we wrap this up, the initial thought we asked was, how does the PGA Tour and an insurance company come together to talk about diversity and inclusion? I think those stories came together very well as you think about 2 industries influencing millions of folks, either by the way they employ it and the folks they interact and touch with as consumers or stakeholders in their community. And we're all in this together, different spot on the journey, but all very eager to embrace diversity, inclusion, and really make a positive impact on everybody in our community. So again, thanks to everybody. If you want to consume this again, maybe share it with some friends. We're going to email a copy of this to everybody who registered today. So if you missed anything or want to take some notes, you're going to get a chance to do that again. So look for that in your inbox. And thank you very much again for joining us today for Inspire Her.